Welcome guys, we've had the Singapore Grand Prix and now it's that time where we take a look at each and every one of the drivers, how they got on over the whole weekend and give them some kind of a rating. I'm sure you'll agree with everything that I say out here, but yes, all open for your opinions and put your answers in the comments. I love to get all the criticism, critique, it's what we're here for. And for a change this week, I'm not going to start with the race winner. I'm going to start with the guy that finished last, Daniel Ricciardo. It looks like he's had his last race in Formula 1. He was done a little bit dirty, I think, by the Red Bull Alpha Tauri team, isn't it? Because he's such a great character of Formula 1, a talent. He was absolutely brilliant. Fantastic in front of the cameras, and why he got so much of the fans behind him. He got driver of the day despite finishing last. Got from the team a fastest lap to take home with him in memory of him helping Max Verstappen. Pretty much that's what it was. He had a stinker of a race, but to win driver of the day just says everything, because it was everything everyone cottoned on then, that without any official announcement, it will be Daniel Ricciardo's last race in Formula 1. It looks for all the world that Liam Lawson will be taking his place in Austin next time out. And if it doesn't, well, it'll be the biggest surprise ever. There was hugs, tears, emotional interviews from Daniel Rick. He was one of the last drivers out of the paddock. And yeah, strange the way it's all been handled. He deserved a lot better from the Red Bull family, that they've just kind of left him out on the cold. He's gone out in a bit of a whimper, has not really been given the fanfare and given the opportunity to say this is his final race. He spent a fair few moments in his car, probably realising that this is the last time that he can call that his home as an F1 driver. There was potential rumours that he could be in a Red Bull seat as a test driver or a reserves driver. He said no to that because it actually makes no sense for him. He said that, you know, there's no other further movement in his career. This is the end of it, Daniel Ricciardo as we know it. Take a look at his weekend. Is there any point? It was, horrible. A poor qualifying session, qualified in 16th. Came home in 18th. He pitted to take the fastest lap and actually set the track record around Singapore. A 4 out of 10 because it wasn't a great race from him. Just an absolute shame the way it's ended for Daniel Ricciardo. He came back to have this fairy tale and see how he'd end up back in the Red Bull, taking Sergio Perez's seat. It's kind of not gone well at all, has it? Yuki Tsunoda's done a really credible job in that car. And Daniel Rick is giving way to Liam Lawson, who they think is a special talent, and is this his chance to audition for Sergio Perez's seat for next season, because Sergio isn't really sent the world alight apart from what he did in Baku, but put it in the wall for all his good work. But yeah, that's the bit on Daniel Ricciardo. Shame that it's the last time we see him in F1, but he's had a fair stint and he's done a fairly decent job for most teams he's been with. And let's get to the race winner. Lando Norris took home a fantastic victory. He was by far and away and above the fastest man on the track, comfortably a second and a half for most of the race. He was pretty fantastic. The only scare was, well, 2 or 3 of them, and we've seen other drivers do it, so I'm not going to be too harsh on him. I think the only problem here is that he did it 2 or 3 times, wasn't it? The big lockup where he was staring straight at the wall, for all the world it looked like he'd take a wing off that to save it and live for just small damage on the wing. Was really lucky. He then love tap on the rear wheel against the barrier as well, which actually last year we seen George Russell do and didn't survive. That was a DNF for him, so got lucky there. And then he went really wide. We're trying to overtake a back marker towards the end of the race. So 3 strange mishaps, errors, which could have been really costly. They weren't. Not going to be too harsh. We've seen other drivers do it. I still remember Michael Schumacher dropping it and spinning it when he was way out in front in Indianapolis all them years ago. Max Verstappen, we've seen him come close. I remember in Canada where he was leading. He's nearly dropped it and put it in the wall there. So fantastic, brilliant. World champions do this. I'm not going to be too critical of him, but it's needs to just. The only downer on an absolutely fantastic weekend. He was phenomenal through practice. Qualifying was brilliant, and in the race he was outstanding, but for these 3 sort of minor blips. A 10 out of 10 for me, because it was such a brilliant drive, a dominant drive. He was 20-25 seconds ahead of Max Verstappen 27-28 laps in, which is absolutely unheard of. Max did a great job coming up behind him, but 10 out of 10 Lando Norris. Fantastic weekend, much needed. The only downside here is that Max Verstappen comes home in second place. He didn't really get to take the big chunk of lead out of him, and Max did a brilliant job, a fantastic second place in qualifying, a track where we really thought they would struggle, but he managed to, if for all the world he looked like he would struggle. When you look at free practice, he tended to got it right, or the setup right for qualifying. A brilliant lap to bring it home in second place, and then from there on he had a really good race. It looked like he might come under the threat of Oscar Piastri, but then kept that 18-second gap to Oscar, and brought home a really good second place. The car looked good and quick towards the end of the race, which he took home some comfort from. And Red Bull now finding their feet and going to make their way back. They've got big upgrade coming apparently for Austin. They've got 4 weeks to iron out this car. This gap has this break has kind of come at the wrong time for McLaren, hasn't it? And especially on Lando Norris's charge, because it's given Red Bull a break from racing and they can go away, and I'm sure they'll be working mega hard on that car over the next 4 weeks so that they can come back, and if they win one of them 6 races, I think the championship challenge potentially is over. But there's 3 sprint races to go, so 8 points. So any one of them weekends where Max Verstappen in particular struggles, and if the car isn't better by Austin, then we are going to see a championship battle. There's no two ways about it. But this weekend it was a brilliant job from Max Verstappen. A really, a car that is struggling to bring it home. Second place, he probably maximised everything he could out of that car. I'm going to give him a 9 out of 10 because I thought that was a really good drive. Third place, Oscar Piastri, and well, he had a really horrible qualifying session, which meant that it should have been a McLaren 1-2, given how quick that car was. Made some impression early doors, but it's a bit of a struggle. Then by the time he got past the slower cars in front of him, he had 18 seconds to make up on Max Verstappen when he pitted and had a good chunk of 5-6 laps fresher tyres than Max Verstappen, and didn't close up on him. And I think that's the most disappointing part of Oscar Piastri's race. He was, never you thought he'd be hand over fist, especially given the pace that Lando Norris had around Singapore in his pocket. You thought for all the world that Oscar Piastri would be in Max Verstappen's window mirrors by the end of the race. It wasn't to be, and he just came home a steady 18 seconds behind Max Verstappen. I wonder if he was carrying any issues on his car for him to be so slow, but overall I think the horrible qualifying session really cost him. I'm going to give him a 7 out of 10 for this weekend. Fourth place man, George Russell. He beats his teammate Lewis Hamilton, who started ahead of him. He got beaten by Oscar Piastri. I think their car wasn't as fast as either of McLaren's or the Red Bull in the race. He went long in his first stint and then undercut or overcut Lewis Hamilton. He came out ahead of Lewis despite going long on his first stint. Lewis started on the soft tyres, and that really meant he was always on the back foot against his teammate. And then it was a solid race from George Russell. He did really well to put a decent gap in, so by the time he had the charging Ferrari, he had enough of a gap to sort of hold on to that win. And he was under pressure for the last couple of races from last couple of laps from Charles Leclerc, but did really well to keep that gap at the 6, 7 tenths, 8 tenths that he needed just to stay out of the DRS attack. It was going to always be difficult to overtake in Singapore. It needed to be lick the stamp and send it from Charles Leclerc, to take the words of Daniel Ricciardo on that one. But overall, Russell did a really decent, solid job in that Mercedes, probably the best that they could have hoped for. They've gone off the boil a bit, haven't they? They, again, like went into a break where they were absolutely, all the momentum was with them, and they've come off that break, the summer break, and not really been quite the same car that went into it. So they've got a bit of work to do. There'll be a bit of head scratching to see how they can pull that performance back. Are they still putting all their resources into this year's car? Potentially, given the rules are going to stay the same for 25, but I think they're all looking at 26 and trying to earmark where they go with that, and that's probably where most of the work is taking place. But it'll be interesting to see if any upgrades further, or big upgrades, come on this Mercedes by the end of this, or before the end of the season, because they kind of now need them, don't they, to bridge that gap to McLaren and Red Bull. And it's a bit of a scrap now, isn't it, with Ferrari as well. There's kind of in no man's land in the constructors, not really much to fight for there, but they're, you know, eager to pick up points, and all the points that they get money for. So crucial for everybody in Formula 1 that they do well there. And George Russell, a solid race, 7 out of 10 for me. 5th place man, Charles Leclerc. He started 9th after a stinker of a qualifying session for Ferrari. They both qualified 9th and 10th. Both Ferraris, and Charles Leclerc, honestly expected so much more from him. He was blisteringly quick in the free practice 1 and 2 sessions, wasn't it? It looked like a showdown between Red Bull, McLaren and Ferrari, and it just wasn't to be at all. Yeah, stinker session, and that really meant they were on the back foot. I think they had a quick car around this circuit. You know, Charles Leclerc was from 9th place, stuck behind Alonso, Hülkenberg. They went really long, overcut Fernando Alonso, or overcut Nico Hülkenberg, came out ahead of him, and then passed Fernando Alonso, and was on a charge to close down George Russell, but I think they had just a bit too much to do. Had he qualified better though, I think he would have been in a decent battle with Max Verstappen, so I think that's the disappointing part of Ferrari's weekend. Just a poor qualifying, and especially where it's so difficult to overtake around Singapore. In street circuits, you tend to have a bigger gap between cars anyway, as they space out naturally as the cars go around, and you're already sort of can be 10-15 seconds behind sort of second, third places by the time your first pits come around, and that's an awful lot to claw back later in the race. But Charles Leclerc, I think he did a brilliant job to recover from a 9th place in a track that was really, really difficult to overtake. Wasn't a great race, but I'm going to give him a 9 out of 10. 6th place man, Lewis Hamilton, and he had a brilliant qualifying session to put himself up in 3rd place. What were Mercedes doing putting him on the softs? The only guy in the top 10 on the softs. He had to pit early. He probably should have struggled round on the softs for another 10 laps if that was possible. We've seen other cars do it, but they were so slow, losing so much time, that I think potentially would have ended up back where he was in any event. He then just had no tyres to fight with once everyone went long on their first stops. Lewis Hamilton on his hards had already done 10-12 laps before everybody else had fresh hard rubber, and he was easy passings, wasn't he, for the likes of Charles Leclerc and Oscar Piastri, and then made himself down in 6th place. I'm going to give him a 4 out of 10, but really that's all should be for the Mercedes strategy team that thought it was a great idea to start him on the softs. Yeah, it just wasn't a good race tyre at all, and it really backfired on Lewis, who had a really good qualifying session for a change. 7th place finisher, Carlos Sainz, and well, he dropped it in qualifying. It's, yeah, the start of Ferrari's downfall in qualifying. It was horrible, and then in the race he got a poor start, dropped 2 places, back down in 12th place. So I think it was a really good recovery to get back up into P7. He easily got ahead of Fernando Alonso in the end, but he just wasn't close enough to challenge Lewis Hamilton. Yeah, he'll be disappointed because he won here last time out, and I'm sure he came into this race weekend thinking there's a lot more on the cards for him. But a decent recovery in the end, from 10th to 7th. I'm going to give him a 7 out of 10. 8th place finisher Fernando Alonso started in 7th, finished in 8th. I think he had a really good race, didn't he? He went undercut Nico Hülkenberg, which was really crucial for his race, and then was closing in on Carlos Sainz towards the end of the race. His car was looking good. He's the only man keeping Aston Martin in the points. Again, it's the Fernando Alonso that we know, isn't it? He's got his mojo back a little bit, hasn't he, now that I think he's seen Adrian Newey sign, and looking forward to potentially fight for championships in 2026. I'm sure Fernando Alonso is. And yeah, a really good solid race from him. He can be happy with his weekend. I'm going to give him an 8 out of 10. 9th place finisher Nico Hülkenberg, and he had a brilliant weekend, I thought. Fantastic qualifying to keep and get 6th place. He was always going to struggle to keep that position considering the cars around him, but he held off Fernando Alonso and Charles Leclerc fantastically well early doors, and then he was undercut by Fernando Alonso, overcut by Charles Leclerc in the end. So I think either way he would have struggled. He'd never really had the car or to battle with them two in the race, and then he had the charging Sergio Perez behind him, who he kept behind him for so long. He did a brilliant defensive job for most of that race, and to bring home some good points for the Haas team. They can be very happy with this weekend, and yeah, a brilliant job from him. A 9 out of 10 for me. 10th place finisher, the last of the points finisher for Sergio Perez. He started 13th, got a brilliant start, was up to 10th, and then pretty much stayed there for most of the race. Wasn't making too much impression early doors, and then he came out and got stuck behind Nico Hülkenberg, who was in a much faster car than Hülkenberg, but just couldn't get close to overtake. Had Colapinto on his back for a fair bit of the race as well. So yeah, disappointing weekend. He was so disappointed and just glad the race was done in the end. Another poor weekend from Sergio Perez. He'll be disappointed because he had some good momentum after Baku, where he had, you know, that 2nd place finish potentially on the cards, but for the accident. So he's kind of reverted back to the Sergio Perez of old, hasn't he, this weekend? I'm going to give him a 4 out of 10. It was disappointing at the end. 11th place finisher for Franco Colapinto, and this guy is putting himself right in the frame for a Formula 1 seat, isn't he? Shame there's only 2 seats left, or potentially 1 now. Looks like Lawson's taken that Racing Bull seat. Could he take Valtteri Bottas' seat in Sauber? It's going to be difficult, but with the first Argentine on the grid, I'm sure he'll come with some decent backing for that team. He had a brilliant start into turn 1, take 3 places. I know Alex Albon wasn't happy with his antics, but saying it was a dive bomb, but he was under control and cleanly took 3 cars into that first corner, and then after that it just set up his race. He was brilliant. It was a good race. He finished 1.5 seconds behind Sergio Perez in the end. Probably didn't have the car to overtake Sergio, unfortunately, but to be so close in the racing, it's so much better than what we've seen Logan Sargent do in that Williams. He's been absolutely brilliant this weekend in a track which is really difficult. Most rookies really do struggle here in their first time out, and in a new team, second race, I think he's done an absolutely fantastic job. I'm going to give him a 9 out of 10. 12th place finisher Yuki Tsunoda, and after a brilliant qualifying session in 8th place, finished in 12th, so you can only be disappointed with that. He went really long on his first stop and then went on the softs, which was probably the wrong tyre to be on. Dropped out of the points. He was 2 seconds behind Franco Colapinto in the end. Yeah, disappointing from Yuki Tsunoda in the race, but I think that's more of where this car is. You know, he dropped out of the points from decent qualifying in a place where it should be difficult to overtake. It just didn't really come together at all for Yuki or the Racing Bulls, and they're having real issues with this car, aren't they? They have, from their early start of picking up or fighting for points, they seem to have been knocked off that, haven't they? And they're looking like they're falling into the grasp of the other guys behind them in the constructors. A lot of work to do for them. Yuki is disappointing, a 4 out of 10 for me. 13th place finish for Esteban Ocon, and he had a really lonely race. He was 35 seconds behind Yuki Tsunoda. Managed to keep Lance Stroll behind him, and yeah, that was as much as his race as he got. It was a bit boring. The Alpine is really struggling. They were really slow around here. A 5 out of 10 for me. 14th place finish for Lance Stroll. Started in 17th, and he had issues on his brakes onto the grid. He's always struggled around here, and this year was no different for Lance Stroll. Yeah, a poor weekend. He was probably just glad it's over. Another year, another struggle at Singapore. he can just only hope for better next time out in Austin. But he's currently gone on another dip in form, hasn't he, where he kind of recovered himself a few races ago, where he was, you know, beating Fernando Alonso, and now he's gone off the boil again. Back to the Lance Stroll we know of old. I'm going to give him a 4 out of 10 for this weekend. 15th place finish for Zhou Guanyu, and well, this car, let's be honest, is not going to go and set the world of Formula 1 alight, is it? It's always a struggle, and it was another struggle for him. But the fact that he beats a couple of cars, beats his teammate who started ahead of him, I thought it was a really good race from Zhou. And yeah, another one. Where will he end up in Formula 1? Who knows? Out of a race seat at the moment, and well, fighting with his teammate to keep that one seat that's remaining in Sauber. One of them's got to go. If I was a betting man, I'd expect it to be Zhou, but he does come with good backing from China, so could it be a money thing that sways things? Who knows? But I'm giving him a 7 out of 10 because I was impressed with his weekend. 16th place finish for Valtteri Bottas. Started in 19th, beaten by his teammate. He beats Gasly and Daniel Ricciardo. I suppose that's as good as you can get. He was close to Zhou Guanyu though in the end, wasn't he? Less than or just over half a second behind him in the race finish. Yeah, disappointing race, but I guess this is just where this car is. A 5 out of 10 for me. Pierre Gasly started in 18th place, finished in 17th, and this was, well, another horrible weekend for him, wasn't he? Went really long in his first stops and then thought he'd go onto the softs and make some inroads from there. Got a poor pit stop, it was really slow. From there on, well, the softs just weren't the race tyres for this weekend at all, were they? He struggled from there. It's been a horrible weekend for Alpine and for Pierre Gasly. I'm going to give him a 3 out of 10. And let's take a quick look at the DNFs, and the first of which was Alex Albon, retired on lap 17 with an overheating power unit. And his race was, well, horrible right from the start, wasn't he? Had a really good qualifying session, started in P11, dropped 4 places down to P15, and what was worse was he was stuck behind Kevin Magnussen, who was on the hards. He put early to try and the undercut, and then, well, he came out and it was a slow lap 16, a DNF lap 17. No rating for him. He didn't complete much of the race after that. And well, next is Kevin Magnussen, and he completed 50 laps. He had a scruffy race, didn't he? He was outqualified by his teammate, in the shadow of his teammate all weekend. And this is a guy, I think, again, puts pressure on himself. He don't think he's done enough to confirm himself in a race seat. I think he knows that, and he'd probably just enjoy the next 6 races if he gets them. We've seen what happened with Daniel Ricciardo. Could we see the same with Kevin Magnussen? You know, Ollie Berman came in last race and he pulled off a spectacular weekend, and Kevin Magnussen kind of putting himself under pressure. A bad weekend, hit the wall, and then a DNF not long after that. He completed 50 laps, so I'm going to give him a rating of 3 out of 10. It wasn't very good for him at all. So let's take a quick look at the predictions review, and yeah, can't say no more. Let's not look at this weekend. It was, yeah, couldn't be more wrong, could I? For pole position, I thought it'd be Charles Leclerc. I thought the Ferraris would be strong round here. I expected Lando Norris to take second. He didn't, and Oscar Piastri. It was a Norris pole, Verstappen second, and a surprise Lewis Hamilton in third for qualifying. For the race, though, I did have Lando Norris to win, and it's the only thing I got right this weekend in the predictions. Carlos Sainz had to finish second, and Max Verstappen took that, and Charles Leclerc to finish in third, and Piastri took that. I thought it'd be a good weekend for Ferrari. I couldn't be any more wrong, was I? It was so poor in qualifying. In the race, they were better, and it's a shame that they've qualified so badly, because I think they had the car to actually, yeah, potentially get a 2-3 or a 2-4, but it, just didn't come around at all. Yeah, stinker of a weekend for them. And I thought it'd be a bad weekend for Red Bull, and actually Max Verstappen has done the best job he could. Real damage limitation, coming home in second place this weekend, where I thought they would really struggle. Sergio Perez, back to the Sergio Perez that we know, like I said, and he did struggle, but are we surprised? Probably not. I think Baku was where Sergio Perez is a real specialist, and he's shown what he can do there, but I kind of expect Sergio to go back to what we've seen before. And yeah, it was, I'd have to say, a decent weekend for Red Bull actually in the end, to come home second in a race track where we thought they would really struggle. They kind of didn't, coming home second, and can be really happy with that. They've got 4 weeks now to go away and work on that car, like I said. And next up, Austin, 4 weeks time. Should be another cracking weekend of racing. We've got 3 back-to-back races when we get to Austin, a bit of a break, and then another 3 back-to-back races for the end of the race, end of the season. Got 3 sprint races to throw in the mix as well, so an awful lot of points to be made up or gained on the table, and it all depends now on what Red Bull can do with this struggling car. If it struggles, continues to struggle, I think we're in for a real fight for the championship. It should be fantastic. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe and comment. As always, see you next time.